Hey, fifth graders, we're going to be talking about the English in North America and some of the reasons they settled in North America. If you want to read pages in your book, 128, oops, let's try that again. There we go. If you want to read in your book, pages 128 to 134, that'll give you some more context, a little bit deeper understanding of the lesson. So feel free to read those now, or you can watch the presentation and then read them afterwards. Either way, you need to read them. So Spain and England were bitter rivals. They did not like each other at all. They were constantly fighting over power and wealth and land. And so in the late 1500s, the English decided they wanted to set up a colony in North America. They saw how Spain was getting rich off of the gold and silver they were bringing back, and Queen Elizabeth actually said, "Hey, I want some of that too. So we need to go over there and compete with Spain so that they're not getting ahead of us." Now, it didn't happen overnight, and it took them several tries, but eventually England would get a foothold in the Americas and kind of push everyone else out. So you'll see that happen over the next couple of hundred years. But for now, let's stick with England getting over there and trying to make their first colony. So before England actually started Jamestown, they had a colony before that, and they had set up a small settlement, and they called it Roanoke. Later became known as the Lost Colony because while they were there, they had a lot of issues with the American Indians. And, you know, we got to remember that the English were not used to living off of unfamiliar land and farming and gathering food. So they struggled to find a way to survive on this new land, and the American Indians for a while did help them. So initially, the American Indians really did help the English colonists survive, but there may have been a drought that had happened, and something happened that caused the American Indians to stop helping the colonists, and so they started to starve, and a lot of them died. So the survivors decided to go back to England and get help and say, hey, you know, we're not doing very well over here. We got to try again. So they sent some more, about 150 settlers, to Roanoke Island and said, okay, you guys can go settle here and let's try again. But because of their last interactions with the American Indians, things did not go very well, and the American Indians just stopped helping the English, stopped trading, stopped giving them food, and so it was going bad again. And John White, who was the leader of Roanoke, decided to go back to England and get help. Well, it's about a 3 month trip across the ocean to England and then about a 3 month trip back. So some time passed, but when he got back, all of the settlers were gone. All of the English settlers were gone, and Roanoke was abandoned. It was deserted. And the only thing they found was a carving in a tree that spelled this out. Let's see if you can say this word. Croatone. And to this day, we're not really sure what happened to that lost colony of Roanoke. But that's what was carved in the tree when John White and some of the other leaders came back to help the English that were struggling. So it was actually about 10 years later that they actually started to see some success in their next colony of Jamestown. And there was a company called the Virginia Company. We'll talk about them in a little bit, but Jamestown started to do pretty good. They were actually making some money, and they seemed to be settling fine. And the issues with the American Indians weren't as severe as they had been. And this time, the English leadership, the guys in charge, were a little bit more smart, and they said, "Hey, let's not do anything to offend or upset the American Indians. Let's be nice with them and let's treat them fairly because, yeah, we're going to need them to survive. We already learned from Roanoke what happened, so they tried their best to keep those relations a lot more friendlier than they had been." So Jamestown seemed to be doing okay, but one of the problems they faced it was the location they decided to make Jamestown was not the greatest. The water wasn't very good. It was kind of swampy, and mosquitoes that carried disease were there. So they actually did kind of struggle there for a little bit. And as this, as they started to struggle, their relations with the American Indians surrounding them also started to struggle. So things were not going good for Jamestown for a little bit. So when when John Smith became the leader of Jamestown, he really tried to improve the colony by making alliances or friendships with the American Indians a lot stronger. And that's where the famous story of him meeting Pocahontas and really confirming that they were there to work alongside the American Indians and not really kind of treat them the way Spain had in the past, but they wanted to be friendly. And so John Smith and Pocahontas becoming friends really helped that relationship. So that helped the American Indians get along with the English settlers, and that strengthened their relationship, which also strengthened their ability to depend on each other for food. And although this was still happening, the Jamestown was still not successful in finding gold. So they did not have really valuable goods they could sell back to England, and the Virginia Company, which was giving money to help the settlers in Jamestown, was getting they were getting a little bit frustrated that they weren't getting that gold and silver that Spain had. So there was a colonist in 1612. His name was John Rolfe, and he found this new type of tobacco that was very popular in England. So he was able to find a really good export or a really good uh, product to send back to England because the tobacco that was grown by the local American Indians was not something that the English people really liked. But once John Rolfe found this new type of tobacco, English really got excited and they started to want more and more of it. So this made Rolfe uh, become real important because the tobacco that he discovered became the first cash crop in Jamestown. I mean, there were other things. They sent lumber, glass, and tar and pitch that were sent to England, but tobacco, especially the one that John Rolfe found, became the thing that made the most money for Jamestown, which in turn also helped the Virginia Trading Company as well, because they had been going so long without finding any gold or silver. They were losing money and they were getting frustrated. But this tobacco, this cash crop, was really helping them um, to get rich, essentially. And as the word got out that this cash crop of tobacco was starting to make money for settlers and for colonists, and ultimately for the Virginia Trading Company, more colonists wanted to come to the Americas and they wanted to get land. So the Virginia Trading Company would give them land if they would use that land to farm to make more tobacco to send back to England and sell. So, yeah, that really kind of increased the amount of English colonists that wanted to come across and start their own business or their own farm here in the Americas. So, in about 1619, colonists were given their right to own land. That was from the Virginia Company, and the House of Burgesses was created, giving them a voice in government. They created it so that the landowners could be a part of the government and kind of make decisions that had to do with how they were going to move forward in their agreement. The House of Burgesses became the first kind of representative government um, of the colonies, which going forward is going to be really important. And the reason that that government was even started or established in the first place is because these colonists that were given land by the Virginia Trading Company wanted to have a voice and to make have their opinions heard and to make big decisions about how they were going to establish, more farms and more land. And the Virginia Trading Company allowed them to create this House of Burgess so that they could essentially self-govern themselves. And remember, all this is happening in North America, so the king in England are far away from all the decisions being made here, and it does take time for news to travel. So this is kind of the beginning, the planting the seeds of the colonists starting to seek their own type of government. So, kind of the big takeaways from this lesson are that now England has arrived. England is now in the Americas, and they've established a successful colony, and they started to make some money, and they are ready to kind of challenge Spain in the Americas with what they were doing with their land and power. And so that, along with the successful government that Jamestown created with the Virginia Trading Company and allowing colonists to own land and allowing them to have a voice in government. So those were really the big takeaways from this lesson. Thanks for listening.